Well, I think the one who can best answer that will be the donor of the 10 billion euro, and we would like to ask them how they would want us to use their hard-earned money when it comes to ASEAN. So perhaps President Michel. No. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. We had an extraordinary opportunity today to collectively look back on our shared successes and to exchange views about our prospects for the future. We looked back on ASEAN-EU achievements, most recently the signing of the ASEAN-EU Comprehensive Air Transport Agreement that was signed last October, and the adoption of the Plan of Action to implement the ASEAN-EU's Strategic Partnership for 2023 to 2027. We noted the continued strengthening of cooperation between our regions throughout the pandemic through the following mechanisms: the ASEAN Regional Integration Support from EU+, the EU support to higher education in the ASEAN region, the Enhanced Regional EU-ASEAN Dialogue Instrument, the EU-ASEAN Cooperation on Sustainable Use of Peatland and Haze Mitigation, Biodiversity Conservation and Management of Protected Areas in ASEAN, the Integrated Program in Enhancing the Capacity of AHA Center and ASEAN Emergency Response Mechanism, and the ASEAN-EU Migration and Border Management Program Phase 2, to name but a few. We appreciate the EU member states, and the EU financial institution, in short, Team Europe, for the combined response of over 800 million euro to fight the health, social, and economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic in ASEAN. As we move forward towards post-pandemic recovery, we eagerly anticipate the resumption of negotiations for the establishment of an ASEAN-EU Free Trade Agreement and of the ASEAN-EU Trade and Investment Work Program. I am pleased that today's summit imbued all of us as ASEAN and EU leaders alike with a sense of renewed commitment to continue nurturing and expanding our unique ASEAN-EU partnership, which will serve us well as we are squeezed by the myriad challenges that we have just discussed, such as the supply chain issues brought about by the pandemic, the global threat to food and energy security made worse by the conflict in Ukraine, and to the societal and economic havoc wrought by climate change, to name a few. I am particularly pleased that this landmark ASEAN-EU commemorative summit was shepherded to conclusion during the Philippines coordinatorship for ASEAN-EU dialogue relations, and that the adopted ASEAN-EU joint leaders statement is reflective of the broad nature of our relations and shows clear commitments from both sides to further enhance our relations. We hope to achieve more milestones as the Philippines continues to guide the ASEAN-EU dialogue relations until 2024. I assure my fellow ASEAN member states and all European Union member states that the Philippines will continue to expend all efforts available to ensure that the implementation of the Plan of Action to implement the ASEAN-EU Strategic Partnership for 2023 to 2027 proceeds as intended. We will strive to expand and deepen our cooperation in the priority areas of post-pandemic economic recovery, strengthening of public health institutions, maritime security and cooperation, environmental protection and sustainable economic development, combating, of course, climate change, and connectivity with its new definition, which goes beyond the strict definition of digital connectivity, but connectivity in all manners, by air, by land, by sea, by digital means. We also will work for the digital transition and the lessening of the so-called digital divide, migration, and gender justice. We look forward to nurturing and bringing forth ASEAN-EU relations to greater heights in our role as country coordinator for ASEAN-EU relations in the next 2 years. Before I end, allow me to thank Your Excellencies, EU Council President Charles Michel, EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, Czech Prime Minister Peter Fiala, and all EU member state leaders for your very warm welcome that you have given us all here in Brussels. And we look forward to the next commemoration of EU-ASEAN relationships. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll now take a couple of questions. Let me start with someone from the Philippines. We had Alexis Romero from Philippine Star. Yes, please.
Good day, President Marcos. How are you doing?
Just about managing.
Okay, thank you very much. President Marcos, you cited in your speech earlier the need to go beyond declaring respect and support for UNCLOS and to see an effective application of the UNCLOS to address maritime disputes. And we all know that this includes the South China Sea row. What concrete measures can the ASEAN and the EU undertake to ensure the rule of law in disputed areas beyond the usual strongly worded statements?
Well, this is one of the reasons that we have these conferences, is to map out any possible actions that might be jointly taken, because every action that might be taken that objects or brings light to a possible violation of the UNCLOS is much stronger when it is brought about by a group of nations such as ASEAN, and if the EU now, with our strategic partnership, is able to also join their voices to that, then that will be much stronger in the terms of actually being able to enforce what UNCLOS is all about. Their commitment, by the EU's commitment, which is found in the joint declaration, the EU's commitment to even the doctrine of the DOC, the doctrine of behaviors in the South China Sea, is already a very, very big step for us in the Philippines, for example, and for all the countries around the South China Sea. That we now have the support, a strategic support from not only the member countries of EU, but of EU itself. Now, because EU and ASEAN together comprise the largest, most well-organized regional agrupations, then that will be a very, very strong position to be able to negotiate, even individually for the Philippines or jointly with ASEAN or even with the EU as perhaps as a third party for us to take action and to negotiate further these difficulties that we are all having to face with the problems in terms of territoriality in the South China Sea.